Okay, what I'd like you to do is turn to the person sitting to your left or right and have a discussion. Do you find this to be controversial? Do you find it to be arguable? And do you find it to be clearly defined? Take a few moments, talk with your partner, and then we'll see what you guys come up with. Go to it.
I thought it was controversial.
Yes.
I just loved it. I mean, it really makes you stop and think, makes you want to watch out what you say. Oh my gosh, you know, it just shows what it shows. And he wasn't specific. He didn't point a finger at just a specific group. He was controversial across the board.
Right.
So that makes it even better, because it makes you have to really stop and think, you know, say, oh, well, he's really going to support Obama. No, he's not. So that controversy, I think, is a tool for thinking.
Yeah, he definitely was not clearly defined because he didn't hammer the same point all the way through. Everything, all it gets argued is being angry, but all over the place.
You know, I think what it did was made you want to pay attention. You wondered, what's he going to say next? Who's he going to pick? So you got to be a better listener to that controversy. I think if somebody were just arguing or clearly defined, it could be boring. It's interesting. So when somebody stands in front of this, what happens? Like I saw, Rick was sort of like in front of the camera, but he really wasn't.
He was.
What do you do then? Oh, you just show him?
That's all I can do.
Yeah, okay.
They're going to have to
60 seconds, folks.
away from us. I'd be sitting on the other side of the room because the door's here, but there's no electrical outlet.
Oh, we need to give you a better room. What the heck's wrong with them? I should have made the more conducive to this.
The walls on the side of the door there was nothing on that wall. It was all put.
I won't be here the next time, but I was going to say the next time it's here, I'll try to get a room with the right outlet, but that'll be a while before it comes back here.
Okay, show of hands. Who thinks that this passage is controversial? Show of hands. Get them up. Mark, why controversial?
Well, first thing that I thought of why yes was Hitler. That's the first
Yeah,
thing
being compared to Hitler is really not a good thing, right?
You know, Hitler, he goes against everything that is, said. Some things that people might believe, he'll go against.
Absolutely. Although one thing that's very interesting, it's again part of the reason why I picked this clip. We talk about rhetoric, and we're going to talk about this over the course of the semester. There's rhetoric in terms of content, and then there's rhetoric in terms of form. Now, I will never stand in front of a group of people and tell me that the content of what Hitler had to say was a good idea. But what I will do is stand in front of you and tell you in terms of the rhetorical patterns that he used, the means of trying to be persuasive, he was actually very effective. And as the semester goes on, we're going to talk about not only the content of what you have to say as writers, but the means, the process by which you actually get your ideas down. Process we call logos, which is the way that you use logic. Pathos, which is the emotion that you use in your writing to kind of convince somebody of something. And also ethos, your ethic as a writer, but also the evidence that you use to try to prove what you have to say. So Mark, great comments. We're going to build upon that. Who else thought it was controversial? Show of hands. Susan, why?
Because as a writer and a performer, he is creating a character that works against the message. He's
Yes.
creating a character that is actually opposite of what his private beliefs would be. And as a writer, everything that he's delivering with great seriousness as a performer is being undercut by the narrative that he's giving.
Yes.
So that tension maintains excellent humor, but it does absolutely make him controversial. On a surface reading, people can take it as a genuine delivery of beliefs. When if you listen to anything that he says, and frankly, what he flashes textually in the background, he is undercutting his own message every time he gives it.
Absolutely.
Very
And
much.
here's the deal. As writers, you guys did a great job in English 101 being persuasive writers. You had to, you got here. But realize this, I want you guys to have what we call the power of profundity. It's pop in your writing. And what I mean by that is this, I want you guys to be controversial in what you're trying to say. I don't want you guys to simply regurgitate the ideas that you may find in your research. You got to take an innovative perspective, an innovative spin, something new, some innovative way of looking at that subject matter. And sometimes what that means is that we have to be controversial. We have to say things that might be true. We'll talk about that much later in the semester, the idea of truth. We've got to talk about something that's true in a way that maybe some people don't want to hear it. And sometimes that's part of controversy. Now, also though, realize this, that sometimes we are controversial not to try to get to the truth, but because we want people's attention. I don't want you to be that kind of a writer. We'll talk about that as we go further on into the semester. That's one aspect. Now, secondly, this is when people start to usually have some different perspectives. Do you guys find him to be arguable? Show of hands. Thinks he's arguable. Mark, why arguable?
Well, I thought that he argued the absurdity of the extremes on both sides. And so you walked away, and I first started off that he was clear. I mean, I've kind of moved all three, but that was my take on it. If you go to the extreme of both sides, they both seem extreme and crazy. So
Absolutely. Yet, what's interesting is that he has some evidence, he has some proof. Think about that video clip. How often did you see him cite a politician? How often did you see him cite some other individual? How often did you also see him cite maybe a text? This is evidence in some respects to try to prove that his controversial statement has some validity to it. Now, one of the other things I want you guys to do in your writing is not only be controversial, but I also want you to be arguable. You can't just simply throw it out there on the wall and see what sticks. You have to have evidence to prove what you are trying to say. And we're going to talk over the semester about how you do that. Whether it is facts, statistics, expert testimony, or first-hand observations. Primary, secondary, tertiary texts. More details on that to follow. Anybody else on the arguable side? Any of you guys not find him to be arguable?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Pat.
You're saying that because someone quotes a politician, that gives evidence?
It all depends on how you want to define what is your evidence. This is somebody who's offering a first-hand observation. One of the things that we have to do as a rhetorician is we have to ask ourselves a question. Is that good enough proof? If we have Sarah Palin up here arguing something, is that enough proof? If we throw up Stephen Colbert, is that enough proof? This is also going to be something we'll talk about in English 250. Comm 150, you learn about the essentials of information literacy, like great instructors like Susan Smith, for instance, that taught the course to you. In a class like this one, though, we're kicking it up a notch. It's not just simply enough to access the information. We have to evaluate the quality of it and make a decision about whether or not that evidence is going to be adequate enough for us to prove our thesis statement. It's an excellent question. And that also, by the way, to your point, that might mean that maybe Colbert is clearly being controversial, but maybe not being effective from an argumentative perspective. Also an excellent point. Clearly defined. This is where people always tend to be all over the place with them. Do you find Colbert to be clearly defined? Who says no? Not clearly defined. Guy, why?
Because he didn't do a step-by-step and say, and follow the same thought through the entire thing. It was jumping around.
Absolutely. One of the criticisms that students constantly come up with when they watch this video clip is that he jumps all around. Now reflect for a moment on your own writing. If you're guilty of what we call a spliced essay, you're pulling in a ton of different sources, which is great, you're studying the information. But are you adequately developing your point and staying focused enough in your essay? Give you some chances over the course of the semester to reflect on that when I give you some comments back in your essays. That's one criticism we can make right there, absolutely. Others of you that don't find him reading clearly defined. Mark?
Oh, I said no.
Why?
I was thinking some of those, you just couldn't tell what he really meant, if you're like, live a sheltered life, you might not know what, he's talking about.
Absolutely. I've had students who've watched this clip before you folks that have asked the question, the hell does Spider-Man have to do with what he's talking about? Who is Gabby Giffords? What is this thing about Arizona? Who is Glenn Beck? And the bottom line is this, if you're somebody who doesn't understand the context of some of the evidence that's being provided to one audience, this is why audience analysis is so important for us as writers. We have to consider who the audience is. And that should have an influence on the evidence and the research that we are using to try to prove our point. If you're talking to a bunch of people who want to understand all these references, then you're going to find that it's clearly defined. The individuals that don't, they may say that it is not clearly defined. One?
I see him as both.
Why?
Not defined, and he's